As you mentioned, the presentation will be about varves of northern Poland and the role of climate and human activity in shaping varve structure. So it's a little bit changed in accordance what was announced, but I think this topic will be more adequate to what I'm going to say. This is my email, so if you would like to contact me, please do so. Yeah, just yeah, do so. I would like to start with acknowledgements to all people who were involved at some point in writing papers I'm going to show. But we need to remember that there are many more people involved in those papers, as these papers are part of the projects that took place for several years. So thank you very much. And I mean, not to you, just to co-authors, and I hope for further and fruitful collaboration. So when I started to prepare this presentation, I looked into Varda, that database, and I found that only 4 lakes from Poland are in this database, and I'm going to add there one very soon. But it appeared this is not the best database yet for looking for information about varved sediments in Poland. But luckily, we have a paper by Wojtek Tillman and colleagues who in 2013 published their survey on northern East Poland. And during several surveys, they found that 24 lakes in northeastern Poland are having varved sediments, and at least 4 of those lakes, this is Lake Jaczno, Łazdunne, Szupiły, and Żabińskie, cover their sediments cover almost the entire Holocene. I said almost because, for instance, Lake Szupiły, which is located more or less here, covers the entire Holocene, but Lake Żabińskie, which is, I guess it's here, cover around 10,800 years. We also have varved lakes in northern part of Poland. This is Lake Lubińskie, Gościąż, and Suminko, and they also cover almost the entire Holocene. I'm going to talk today about Lake Lubińskie, but Gościąż and Suminko are still under investigation in our lab. But it's not all. There is also Lake Kierskie in Poznań, which is more or less here, and also several lakes in Tuchola forests, and these lakes are investigated by our colleagues from Poznań, from Toruń in Poland and GFZ in Germany. Yeah. So we know what we have in northeastern Poland and northwestern Poland, but there is also one very iconic lake located in central Poland, and this is Lake Gościąż. This lake is iconic because it has sediments which cover period between the Allerate and present times. At the end of the last, on the 20th century, this lake was quite extensively investigated, and also at the beginning of the 21st century. And also, I think it's around 2015, a project started which aimed among others, at reinvestigation of Lake Gościąż sediments. And what you can see here in the background, this is the monography of Lake Gościąż. It's a very comprehensive study about this lake. And if you go to this website or just Google Lake Gościąż book, what I usually do, you will be directed to this web page, and you can download whatever you need from this book. And yeah, and it's also very, there's also several papers published, so you can also download them. Yeah. Here are several photographs, the archive photographs from coring of this lake. You can find them all at this webpage. There are many more photographs. I just choose the nicest one, which I really like. And what I really like is these pictures, photos were taken at the end of the last century. I think this one is one of the oldest and was taken in 80s. So I would really like to see how the fieldwork outfit has changed, but also the equipment for coring. But you can see that people had quite a lot of fun working on the sediments, and I would probably be happy as well if I found something like that. This is part of the Lake Gościąż sediments. We can see here these very beautifully laminated varves. these characteristic pale and dark laminas. So you can find more figures or pictures of the core at this website. And yeah, if you're interested, just please go ahead and check. I think you will enjoy it. There's one more lake. It's not in northern Poland, but it's in eastern Poland, very close to the boundary with Ukraine. This is Lake Perespilno, which is also very nice because it has laminated sediments, which cover period between all the Dryas and the Pre-Boreal, and some studies are also published in this monography book, but also several papers are available online. Okay, so this was the very short introduction to the current state of the Varved lakes location in Poland. And here I would like just to present very briefly two figures which are most likely very known to everyone, maybe not in this form, but the general concept are probably very well known to everyone. I think this should be updated because it was in last year or 2 years ago. I don't really remember now. We reached 8 billion people living in the world. So I'm showing that to present that if we would like to research or to look for human impact in the sediments, we would probably have to go back at least 4,000 years back in time, which is not really easy because not every record provides nice sediments to perform the analysis on them, but sometimes it's possible. And here on the right hand side, we have also very known Holocene climate change curve, which also shows that the last 50 years was during the last 50 years, let's say, the temperature is rising very fast. And this is obviously related to the human activity over the last millennia. So I would like to answer in this presentation a question about how climate and human activity affect varves preservation, formation and preservation. And to do so, we are going for a journey which starts at the western Poland, and then we go a little bit north, and then west, south, and northeast. And I'm going to present you 6 examples of lakes and what they can tell us about this varve preservation and appearance. So let's start with Lake Lubińskie, which is a post-glacial lake and is located in western Poland, very close to the German boundary. Actually, when you go from Germany to Poland on a highway, then on the right-hand side, there is a pine forest. So the lake is exactly after this pine forest, but unfortunately cannot be seen from the highway. So what I'm going to present here is a multidisciplinary study which has been just recently published in Catena. And unfortunately, it's not on open access, but on Twitter, I posted a link which is to the open access copy of this manuscript, and it should be valid for another 30 days or so. But if you don't have an access, just please, and you're interested, just email me and I will be happy to send it to you. So in this study, we did geochemical analysis, but also pollen and diatom, and also some statistics. But obviously, we also counted varves. This is the green line over here. We had radiometric measurements, so it's cesium, this black crosses, and lead-210, and also radiocarbon dates. These are these yellow circles. Unfortunately, we had several gaps in varve sediments, so we had to perform Bayesian modeling. But I'm not going to talk about that. If you are interested, please go to this paper, and there is many more details given there. We also distinguished 5 macrophages. In this record, the first type was divided into subtypes because it was the varve structures was the same. The difference was between the thickness of the calcite layer in these 2 subtypes. What you can see here, we have here the lithology and the varve thickness. and thickness of calcite layer, diatom layer, organic layer, and mixed layer. And what is very characteristic, you can see that the sedimentation over the over the 2000 years up to the 1000 year of the Common Era was more or less stable, and the varve thickness was more or less stable as well. But then suddenly, around 1000 years of the Common Era, the sudden change happened, and also we can see it in the varve change. It was very rapid, and also the diatom layers appeared in the sediment. Oh yes, so we also did the geochemistry. So it's XRF measurement, scanning, and CNS. I'm not going to go here into details, but you can see clearly the variability of proxies. And this, for instance, shows us the bottom-bottom ventilation, and TI is showing is a proxy of erosion, for example. But we wanted to check if there are any rapid changes in the proxies. So we used change point analysis, which showed that up to 400 years, so the 4th century before the Common Era, there was no rapid change in the system, and only a few were recognized later. Interestingly, the TIC content changed rapidly, which is at the beginning of the Common Era, so it's around here. And this is nicely reflected also in the varve structure and composition. However, the most important shifts were observed in all proxies at the beginning of the first, or at the beginning of the second millennium. And this was noticed in almost every proxy we had. I mentioned this date quite a lot of time right now, but I didn't say what it means. So around 1000 years of the Common Era, there was the emergence of the Polish state. So the tribes which were living in the present Western Poland, they, let's say, decided to create the Polish state. So they needed a lot of timber to build the strongholds, and also a lot of agricultural lands to produce food and provide the food for the community. So this deforestation at this land started. So less dense vegetation cover resulted in increased soil erosion and leading to the enhanced delivery of terrestrial organic matter and nutrients to the lake. So therefore, there was increase in the varve thickness. As I presented here, this was the sudden increase of varve thickness, and also in a growing primary productivity. During the increase of this human activity in the area, the lake became more and more eutrophic. I did not present here the diatom data, unfortunately, but at some point the lake, the diatoms, the dominant diatoms were hyper eutrophentic, so it suggests that there's very high eutrophication in the lake. Next change in this profile started together with the arrival of the Ioannites, who are the order of the Saint John, and they started a huge deforestation in the area. So they removed a lot of forests. They changed the land to the cultivated fields, and they also built a brewery nearby the lake. But they needed a lot of land for planting vegetation, planting food, basically. So this further caused the next shifts through further opening of the catchment, through increased erosion and nutrient delivery. And as these processes had been intensified, the diatom communities shifted towards those with affinity to higher pH and trophy. So while varve thickness remain unchanged until the until the half of the 15th century, when they disappeared from the record. And this is here, and this homogeneous sediments. However, they reappeared in half of the 18th century, and it is mirrored by increased nutrient delivery again to the catchment, and but simultaneously the eutrophication of the lake had been increasing, and the reappearance of lamination was most likely related to this high human impact on the area and the development of hypolimnetic anoxia in relation to the human activity. And this process is well known from other European lakes or the Polish lakes as well. Here I would like to just show you the graphical description of forest cover change and loss of the natural character of the forest. These all changes here were most likely related to the human activity. As you can see, humans were present there since the late Bronze and Air Age, and there was just a short period of settlement gap, and that was the migration period. But through all that time, there was some kind of human activity in the area. And this is very nicely reflected in this curve. So this is the red line shows us the vegetation change. So the higher the value is, the higher human activity in the area. And also it's recorded in the lake response. So the higher the value, the higher allochthonous input. And we can see that around 1000 year of the Common Era, so with time, when there was emergence of the polis state, this proxy started to increase. So in this example, we can clearly see that the human activity caused a lot of changes within the sediments, starting with the different varve formation, different structure, and also to varve disappearance in the sediment and then reappearance. Okay, so let's go further now. Now we are in this part of Poland. So we have Lake Dubie, Lake Salno, and Lake Wąsowskie. They are all post-glacial lakes and located in this northern part of Poland, and they are surrounded now by agricultural fields. So these lakes were investigated by our colleague Ania and other our lab members, and the goal of this paper was to investigate the cultural eutrophication and hypolimnetic hypoxia. And to do that, we took 1 meter-long cores from those lakes, and then developed chronologies by varve counting and also radiometric dating. So it was cesium and lead-210. And also for Lake Wąsowskie, there was a ASCIA 1875 tephra used as a reference point. So it wasn't added to the profile, it was just a reference point. So what's interesting in those lakes is that the sediment structure changes from homogeneous or finely laminated, like in these lakes, through transition period into varves with very well preserved varves. What is interesting also that these changes were gradual and covered 2 decades in more or less 2 decades in Lake Wąsowskie, and 6 decades in Lake Wąsowskie and 2 decades in Lake Salno and Dubie. And for the purpose of this study, we also did geochemistry and statistical analysis, but we also investigated historical maps. And as you can see here, we have for Lake Dubie. So for this one, we have 3 maps. We had 3 maps available, and you can see that at the beginning of 19th century, the area was mostly forested. There was also a small belt, short belt. Or narrow belt of the forest, also from the southern part. But at the end of the 19th century, the area was almost completely deforested, and a lot of drainage channels were built. And this situation remained at this state even in the second half of the 20th century. A similar scenario was observed for Lake Salno, where there was some forest. There were some forests around the lake in the beginning of 19th century, but there was no more lakes in the end of the century. And similar for Lake Wąsowski at the end of 18th century, the area was quite nicely forested, but at the end of 19th century, there was almost no forest left and only arable lands or wastelands and a lot of these drainage channels. So what we can see here, so what does it mean? So those black, the homogeneous sediments or these finely laminated sediments are coming from the time were deposited during the time where there was no strong human impact in the catchment. Once this human action started in the area, so the humans started deforestation and establishing the arable lands, everything started to change. So we had this transitional period, which shows us that this first very intensive agricultural actions around those lakes. So the further effects of agrarian activity are seen in eutrophication due to the nutrient delivery to the lakes and the appearance of prolonged hypoxia in the hypolimnetic waters. So as a consequence, and these long periods with hypoxic or anoxic waters was enabled, and the conditions enabled excellent varve preservation in the topmost part of the sediment. So here we have a very nice example of 3 lakes which recorded the human activity, and we can say that before the human impact there was no varves, and the human actions, so deforestation and increased erosion and development of hypoxic or anoxic conditions led to the varve preservation in the topmost sediments. Okay, so now we are going to the central Poland, so to Lake Gościąż, which is here. All the cores were taken from the middle part of the lake and then were correlated together. And what is very important for the next slide, Lake Gościąż lies in a system of lakes, and those lakes are connected by the Ruda River. And I didn't mention that. So in this part of presentation, I'm focusing on 2 papers. One was led by Daniela Müller from Potsdam and colleagues, and the second one was led by me and my colleagues. This is the results, and I'm going to show you results of these 2 papers very briefly, obviously. So what we did first, we counted varves. So I counted varves from the top of the profile to the end or the beginning of the Holocene, and Daniela counted varves from Younger Dryas and Allerød. And then we developed the chronology. To do so, we had the varve counting, we had radiocarbon datings, it was 15 dates, and we also had cesium and lead-210. But unfortunately, it appeared that this part was either homogeneous, or the varve structure was or the varve quality was really poor and did not enable us to count varves. Therefore, Arne Ramish developed the Bayesian, he performed the Bayesian modeling, and he developed the chronology for this lake. I think Arne said something about this modeling during his talk. It was last year, I guess. So it's available online for sure if you are looking for more details. So together with Daniela, we distinguished 5 microfacies. Here is an error. This is the 5th type. So also here is 5th type. And this gray color means there is no varves there. Sorry, I just made a mistake. So we did distinguish 5 microfacies, and you can think that it's not really a lot. This is not a lot when we talk about the whole Holocene, when we talk about almost 90 meters of sediments. But we decided to limit the number of microfacies, so just to limit them to the main types, because otherwise it could be very challenging to interpret them. So what we have here is that we had a very nicely preserved varves for late Allerød, and these were mostly calcite organic varves. Then on the top of them there was a slump deposits, which were probably most likely part of the very big landslide from the southern part of the lake. And then on this slump, we have very nicely preserved diatom calcite varves of the younger dryas. And these were obviously, these changes in the varve types were driven by the climate. Then we have a very nice transition from younger dryas to the Holocene to pre-boreal, and this change is very nicely presented in Daniela's paper. So if you're interested, please just go ahead and check this paper. And what we see next is that the time period, the next like 3,000 years, are very dynamic in the in the lake. You can see that there was many different changes in the varve types, but then suddenly around 8,000 year BP, there was a very big shift also, I mean, in the varve microphages over here, but also in the chemical data. We think that the climate change as a main driver of the geochemical shift is unlikely, because the timing does not correspond to any climate change, and the amplitude of this shift is much more pronounced than the shift reflecting the major climate change between Younger Dryas and the Holocene. But what we think is that the Holocene thermal maximum, which was at that time, could strengthen the local geochemical shift through increased summer temperature anomalies. And it seems that the main reason for this change was development of the Ruda River, which I showed you in the previous slide, as the main drainage system as a response to the substantial increase of precipitation in the region. Then we have a very nice and calm sedimentation for the next 5,000 years, and it was very boring to count varves, because we had like 5,000 years of calcite diatom varves. Sorry, calcite organic varves. Oh, that was right, calcite diatom varves, sorry. And you can see that it was very typical varve structure with the pale and dark laminas. So it was very boring, but quite fast. But then very sudden increase of varve thickness, and then varve disappearance happened. And we think that could have been triggered by the Homeric climate oscillation, because the data collected during the earlier studies on Lake Gościąż showed that there was no human impact at that time. So that must have been some climatic influence. So we think that was the Homeric climate oscillation, but in Western Europe, it was characterized by increased precipitation, indicated, for example, in Verveldermaar. There was also change of vegetation composition in peatlands and bog bursts in the Netherlands. In the Central Eastern Europe, however, the decline of water levels was observed, and it was observed in several lakes, in several peat bogs, but also in ice core from a Romanian cave, and also in peat bog in Estonia. Moreover, the water level decline was also confirmed by the earlier studies on Lake Gościąż, and show the favoring conditions for deeper water mixing, column mixing, and which could result in longer periods of oxygenation bottom, and therefore lack of varve preservation. Then from around 1,000 year BP, we already know what happened. There was emergence of the polystate. So here was the increased activity in the early medieval period, and also the varve quality, the varve reappeared, and also their preservation was increasing quite fast. And that was most likely related to the higher erosion and nutrients delivery, which caused eutrophication. There was also little ice age probably recorded in this profile. However, if it could have been overprinted by the human activity, but still we think that the longer persistence of the ice cover on the lake during little ice age could have prevented the water column from mixing, and that extended anoxic conditions and hypolimnion, and then fostered varve preservation. And then there is another short period of the varve disappearance, and that's the point when the previous research ended. And we think that this happened because the lake was too shallow, and the land was too open for allowed varve to be still preserved in the sediment. But at the end of the 20th century, the area of Lake Gościąż became protected, so the human activity decreased in this area. The area was reforested, and also this accelerating global temperature rise could have eutrophication of the lake, further eutrophication of the lake, and therefore the varves could have good conditions to reappear. So here we have a very nice example of the sediment record, when we can track the climatic shifts and their influence on the varve formation and preservation in the lake, but also the human impact, which again caused through increased eutrophication. The human activity caused the varve appearance and better preservation. All right. So now let's go to the last lake. I'm pretty sure you have heard or read something about this lake. This is Lake Żabińskie, which is located in northeastern Poland, more or less right here. This is the view to the lake, taken more or less from this part. Here is the recreation place, which is more or less here. Yeah, I very like this lake. It's very beautiful. Yeah, this is the bathymetry of the lake. The lake is quite small because it has only 40 hectares, but it's quite deep. It's around 44 meters, and all cores were taken in the middle part of the lake, in the deepest point. And so in this presentation, I'm going to refer to 4 presentations, but there are many more about this lake, and there are several to come. So if you're interested, just please stay tuned. And we have the chronology for the whole profile for this lake. It was done by Paul Zander and colleagues, and the chronology covered the last 10,800 years. But here, unfortunately, I'm going to show only the last 2,000 years, because for this time period we have pollen data, which can be helpful to assess the human activity in the area. So this model was done by Maurizio, is published in this paper, and it was it consists of varve chronology, also varve counting and radiometric measurements, and also ASCII, if I'm not wrong. So together we distinguish 6 varve microtypes, and they are quite different. You can see that some are iron-rich, they have iron-rich layers, some have a lot of vivianite, but my favorites are the topmost parts, which are very complicated. They have very complicated structure, and I think it was up to 5 calcite layer observed in one cycle, so the varve structure is quite complicated. So what we can see here in the lower part of the lower panel is the lithology and the varve microphases, and some different simple characteristics. So it's like a varve thickness or mass accumulation rate. And here we see the pollen data for this lake. So we have this trees and shrubs, also and herbs, and also cultivated pollen taxa, rudelers and weeds, which are basically human activity indicators. And what we can see at the first glance, looking at these profiles, is that this pollen diagram could be divided in 3 parts. And the first one, the oldest one, from the beginning of the Common Era to more or less around 550 of the Common Era, we can see that there was a small or minor human performance, the agricultural activity, as there are not many pollen related to the cultivated taxa, and also the deforestation didn't seem like a huge one. But anyhow, we can see what happened in the sediment. So there was there were very dynamic conditions, which caused that the changes between the microphases happened very often and very rapidly. There was also very dynamic bottom water ventilation, which is not here, and I'm not going to go into details here. But what we can see that the Lake Żabińskie is really sensitive to even minor changes in the catchment. So then we have 800 years of calm sedimentation here, and the area is mostly reforested and almost 100% wooded. And it seems that this area was outside the zone of more intensive agriculture, despite there was some agriculture activity in the region, but not in the neighborhood of Lake Żabińskie. What we see next is around 400 years of the Common Era, something happened again. And here we can see it in the a little bit in some zoom. So here, around 400 years of the Common Era, first villages around in the region of Lake Żabińskie were founded. And but you can see that there was only slight deforestation, and it was nothing really happening in the sediment because these villages were in some distance from the lake. But then around half of the 16th century, more and more settlements were established in this region, and we can see it like the higher deforestation rate and more cultivated fields. So we can see that this change again caused the changes within the Varve microphages. And then in 1713 of the Common Era, village of Żabinka was established, and this village is located half kilometer south to the lake. So it's the direct neighborhood of Lake Żabińskie, and we can see that the deforestation was quite huge, and also the cultivation area. The cultivated plants were increasing, and we can see that this happened a lot of changes in the profile. What you can see here, marked in this blue bar, it's the time when a little ice age could have happened. But unfortunately, if anything was recorded in these sediments, the climate signals were overprinted by the human activity, and we cannot say anything about that. So as you can see in this example, that the Lake Żabińskie is very sensitive, and it's recorded changes in the catchment caused by human activity, and we can clearly see that this even a minor impact on the catchment caused huge changes within the dynamic and the sedimentation processes and varve formation. And I just mentioned, because I said it at the very beginning when describing this lake, that is my favorite, because we discovered that the last 10 years at least, or 20 years now, probably now it's 20 years, that these varve are very complicated structure, and that's probably also caused by the increasing temperature. All right, so let's summarize what I've just said. So how climate and human activity affect varve formation processes and their preservation over the last millennia. So when we say about climate signals, they are well recorded in varved sediments of northern Poland, but only before the time of increased human activity in the area. And here are the nice examples of Lake Gościąż, when we had the whole Holocene record, and then the Younger Dryas and Alarot. And we see these changes between the varve microphages, but when the human appeared, then this signal could have been overprinted. So we cannot say anything about that. The variable conditions, climate conditions, influence the catchment processes, and therefore the varve formation are and preservation processes, which is quite obvious. But here we had a very nice example on Lake Gościąż again. For example, and then increasing temperature can accelerate eutrophication. And here we can see the very nice example in Lake Gościąż, Lake Lubińskie, also in the three lakes by Ania, who were investigated by Ania, but also in Lake Żabińskie. And the colder conditions cover better varve preservation because of the longer period with ice cover. But on the other hand, the windy conditions can stop varve formation due to intensive water mixing. When we talk about the human activity, on the other hand, in the presented examples, humans have been shaping the environment at least since the late Bronze, but even earlier in Lake Gościąż, but we don't have, I didn't present here the anthropogenic changes or activity during the whole period, but the performance of humans were rather low before the end of the first millennium of the Common Era, with the exception for Lake Żabińskie, which clearly recorded this this minor influence, the human influence at the beginning of the Common Era. After the 1,000 years of the Common Era and the emergence of the Polish state, a large-scale deforestation started in western and central Poland, causing environmental disturbance and shifts in varve processes, and that was clearly visible in Lake Lubińskie record and Lake Gościąż as well. And the human affects varve processes formation in various ways, but most importantly, They lead to varve cessation through vegetation clearance and opening the land. So then the wind can cause more dynamic and deeper mixing, and also foster the varve preservation through increased eutrophication of the lakes. So this is basically all what I wanted to tell you today about the topic.